Sure. Here's the expanded part 1 of the story. A black man was fixing her garage light. Then she said, "You're handsome, you know that," in a natural, emotionally engaging, 2,000-word narrative. The tires of Jamal Carter's work van crunched over the white gravel driveway, the sharp afternoon sun bouncing off the clean windows of the house ahead. He parked beneath the shade of a palm tree, glancing once more at the GPS before shutting off the engine. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of wealthy Florida suburb where the wind hummed through perfect hedges, and every mailbox looked like a miniature lighthouse. Homes here weren't just big, they were magazine-cover beautiful, sculpted and serene. He didn't usually get service calls in places like this. Jamal leaned back in his seat for a second. He ran a hand over his neatly trimmed beard, took a deep breath, and opened the door. His steel-toed boots landed with a thud on the driveway. The house was white stucco with sky-blue shutters, and a vine of purple bougainvillea curled around the front columns like a crown. He reached into the back of his van and pulled out his aluminum ladder and tool belt, then walked up to the garage. The job was simple: replace the faulty garage light above the side entrance. The moment he stepped toward the door, it opened. A woman stepped out, her presence almost startling against the stillness of the afternoon. She was dressed casually in jeans and a loose, tucked-in blue blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a lazy ponytail. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, flicked toward him with a curious calm. "You must be Jamal," she asked. He gave a slight nod, resting the ladder against the wall. "Yes, ma'am. Garage light. That's right." She gestured upward. "It's been flickering for a week. Sometimes it stays off all night, and I hate walking out here in the dark." "I'll take care of it," he said, pulling his gloves on. "Appreciate it." She folded her arms and leaned lightly against the wall, watching him as he worked. Jamal had been doing this kind of work for over a decade. There was a rhythm to it. Climb, unscrew, replace, test, get paid. But something about today felt off that rhythm, different in a way he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was her watching him, not in the annoyed, impatient way of most rich homeowners, but with a kind of genuine curiosity. Not nosy, not flirtatious. Just present. He worked steadily, his arms rising above his head as he unscrewed the old fixture. Wires peeked out like frayed nerves. He adjusted the wires, replaced the connector, tested the voltage. His skin glistened faintly with sweat under the Florida sun, his arms flexing with each motion. She hadn't said much after introducing herself, but Jamal could feel her eyes following each of his movements. He was used to being invisible, or worse, reduced to whatever assumptions people had about black men in blue-collar uniforms. But she wasn't treating him like hired help. She wasn't treating him like anything except a person. He glanced down at her, and she smiled faintly, tilting her head. "You really know what you're doing." Jamal gave a small shrug. "Been doing it since I was a teenager. My dad was an electrician. I tagged along on jobs until he started making me do them myself." "Carter and Sons," she said, reading the logo on his shirt. "Family business. Was. Just me now." He didn't offer more. She didn't press. "Still, it's impressive. I can't even change a ceiling bulb without making a mess." Jamal smiled at that and climbed down the ladder to check the wiring one more time before securing the fixture in place. He flipped the switch. The light blinked, then came on, clean and steady. The warm glow spilled across the driveway like melted gold. "All set," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "All ready," she said, glancing at the time. "Wow, you're fast. I try to be efficient." She disappeared into the house and returned moments later with a cold bottle of water, which she held out to him. "You look like you could use this." "Thanks," he said, taking it with a nod. "It's definitely a hot one today." She leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed again. "Do you ever get tired of doing all the physical work?" He unscrewed the cap and took a long sip before answering. "Honestly, some days, yeah, but I like working with my hands. You fix something, and it works. You can see the result right away. Not like other jobs where you never know if you're making a difference." She watched him closely, as if those words meant more than he knew. "That makes sense. There's something satisfying about fixing what's broken." He looked at her then. Not just her clothes or her polished nails or even her expensive earrings. But really looked. There was a weariness in her green eyes, something hidden under the soft smile and polite small talk. Something tired, maybe lonely. I'm Olivia, by the way, she said, as if remembering that she hadn't introduced herself properly. Nice to meet you, Olivia. You too, Jamal. He bent down to gather his tools, feeling the moment start to drift toward its natural end. That was usually the cue: finish the job, take the payment, nod politely, and walk away. But then, just as he turned to lift the ladder, her voice stopped him. You're handsome, you know that. The words landed like a soft gust of wind. He froze, his hand still on the ladder. He turned his head slowly, blinking once as if making sure she was serious. I'm sorry. She smiled again, this time more deliberately. You heard me. He blinked again, this time chuckling. I wasn't expecting that. Well, she said with a light shrug, maybe you should. He turned fully to face her, the sun now dipping just low enough to paint the sky in soft oranges. Most people don't say that kind of thing to the guy fixing their light. Most people are too afraid to say what they think, she said simply. Jamal looked down for a moment, as if the gravel suddenly held answers. Then he looked up again, meeting her gaze. I appreciate it, really. You probably hear it all the time. He shook his head. Not like that. There was silence for a moment. But it wasn't awkward. It was full. Would you like something to eat? She asked suddenly. I'm ordering Thai. I always order too much. Jamal raised an eyebrow. Are you serious? Why wouldn't I be? He hesitated. This wasn't the script. This wasn't how these things went. But then again, nothing about this felt like a script. I guess I could stay for a minute. She smiled and motioned for him to follow. Inside, the house smelled of lemongrass and vanilla candles. The floors were polished wood, and the kitchen was open, airy, with high ceilings and natural light still pouring in from the windows. Pad Thai or green curry? She asked, pulling out 2 takeout containers. Green curry, he said. They sat at the kitchen island, the marble cool under their arms. He loosened his tool belt and laid it gently on the floor beside his chair. Olivia poured them both sparkling water from a glass bottle. No TV. No distractions. Just 2 people who didn't expect to be here. So, you run the business alone now? She asked as they started eating. Yeah, my younger brother wanted to go into finance. Left me holding the pliers. He smiled. But I don't mind. Keeps me grounded. Do you ever want to do something else? He thought for a moment. Sometimes I write. Nothing serious. Poetry, mostly. She looked up, intrigued. Really? Yeah, my mom taught English before she passed. She used to say words were how we stitch the soul back together. That's beautiful, she said quietly. They ate in silence for a few minutes, each lost in thoughts neither of them voiced. Jamal looked around the house. Everything was clean, carefully placed, but somehow, empty. You live here alone? He asked. She nodded. For the past year. Divorce finalized 6 months ago. No kids. I'm sorry. She shrugged. It happens. We changed. He stopped seeing me, and I stopped trying to be seen. He didn't reply immediately. He knew better than to offer clichés. Sounds lonely, he finally said. She looked at him with something unspoken in her eyes. It was. But today feels less so. And there it was. The shift. Jamal leaned forward slightly, not in flirtation, but connection. Funny how something as small as a broken light can lead to something unexpected. I think everything broken leads somewhere, she said. If we pay attention. The sun had fully set now, and the garage light outside burned steadily. A promise kept. A job done. But neither of them moved. Eventually, she stood and walked him to the front door. He picked up his tool belt, his fingers brushing the cool metal. She followed him outside. He turned once more to face her, the porch light casting a soft glow around her face. That thing you said earlier, he began. About me being handsome. She raised an eyebrow, amused. Yes. He offered a slow smile. You're not so bad yourself. She laughed, then took a small step forward. Her lips touched his cheek lightly, just enough to leave behind the warmth. Drive safe, Mr. Carter. He nodded, still smiling. Good night, Olivia. As he walked back to his van, the light from the garage glowed behind her like a halo. She stood there watching until he turned the corner, the hum of his engine slowly fading into the night. She hadn't expected anything that day, just a light fixed. But she got more. And so did he. Absolutely. Here is the expanded part 2 of the story, A black man was fixing her garage light. Then she said, "You're handsome, you know that," written in a flowing 2,000-word human narrative without headings. The following Monday, Jamal found himself replaying Friday night over and over again. He wasn't the type to get caught up in a single moment, but something about that evening had rooted itself deep in his chest. It wasn't just the unexpected compliment or the home-cooked dinner with takeout. It was the stillness, the calm that followed. The way she looked at him, not like a job, not like someone beneath her station, but like a man. Like someone who mattered. He'd left her driveway feeling like he was walking out of a dream, one he hadn't realized he'd fallen into. Over the weekend, he told no one, not his brother Malik, not his friends at the rec center, not even Ms. Denise, the elderly woman who ran the church lunch on Sundays and always asked him when he'd settle down with a good woman. He kept it to himself, afraid if he said it out loud, it might break apart. But life didn't stop. Jobs lined up. A pool heater in Sanford. A security light in Pine Hills. He drove from place to place, the radio playing old school soul as he worked. Yet every time his hands moved, connecting wires, sealing junction boxes, his mind drifted back to Olivia. Her eyes, her voice, the way she had leaned against the doorway with quiet confidence, offering him water like it was more than hydration. Like it was kindness. On Wednesday, around noon, his phone buzzed. A message from a number he didn't recognize. "Hey, it's Olivia. I hope you don't mind me texting. Just wondering, would you like to join me for lunch? No garage light required." Smiley face. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled. "Would love to. Just finished a job nearby. Where should I meet you?" She replied in seconds. "There's a small cafe in Winter Park, the Maple Jar. Meet you there at 1. Jamal arrived 10 minutes early. He parked and checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, brushing off drywall dust from his shirt and wiping his hands with a spare towel. He hadn't expected to see her again this soon. Truth be told, he wasn't sure she'd text at all. But now that she had, he felt the nerves rising like heat. He walked into the cafe, a warm little place with hanging plants, indie music, and a chalkboard menu. She was already seated at a table by the window, wearing a simple white dress that made her eyes look even greener in the daylight. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, like she'd been waiting all morning. "Hey, stranger," she said. "Hey yourself," he replied, sliding into the seat across from her. The waitress came, took their orders. He chose a grilled chicken sandwich with sweet potato fries. She ordered the avocado toast and lemonade, and left them alone. They talked like they had before, but it was lighter now. Easier. They laughed about how she once blew out the entire second floor trying to plug in 4 space heaters during a winter power outage. He told her about the time he got stuck in an attic full of wasps and had to call for help through a vent. "You're braver than me," she said, wincing. "Wasps are where I draw the line. Honestly, I almost cried," he said, chuckling. "Had to pretend it was sweat." When the food arrived, they paused, blessed it in quiet habit, and began to eat. "So," she asked after a while, "have you always been in Orlando?" "Born and raised. My mom was from Jacksonville, but she moved here when she married my dad. We had a small place on the west side. Not much, but it had a yard and enough space for dreams." She sipped her lemonade thoughtfully. "You talk about your family like they're still right there with you." "They kind of are," he said. "Even the ones that are gone. They show up in the way I move, how I treat people. My dad, he used to say that dignity doesn't come from what you have. It comes from how you carry yourself when no one's watching." She nodded slowly, like she understood that more than most. "What about you?" he asked. "What brought you here?" "My ex, actually," she said without bitterness. "We moved from Atlanta when he got a promotion. I followed because that's what I thought wives were supposed to do. Support, adjust, shrink." Jamal tilted his head. "But not anymore." She looked out the window for a moment, watching a couple walking a golden retriever. "No, not anymore. I spent years making myself small so he could feel big. After he left, I realized I hadn't heard my own voice in a long time. You're hearing it now. I think I'm learning to listen to it." They shared a quiet moment, not of awkward silence, but of recognition. Two lives from different corners of the world, intersecting at a cafe table. As they finished their meals, she glanced at her watch. I have a Zoom call in 20 minutes, she said. But I'm really glad you came. Me too, he said. You know, I almost didn't reply. Wasn't sure if I was reading Friday right. She smiled, leaning forward slightly. You read it right. They stood and walked to the door. Outside, the Florida sun was high, and the world hummed with normal life. But to Jamal, everything felt just a little brighter. You want to do this again sometime? He asked, opening the door for her. I'd like that, she said. But next time, I'm bringing dessert. They parted with a promise, not of anything serious, not yet, but of return. Over the next few weeks, they texted often. Little messages, song, links, pictures of sunsets, jokes about clients. They met for lunch again, then dinner. Eventually, Olivia invited him over, not for repairs this time, but for coffee on the patio and long talks under fairy lights. She lit candles, he brought pastries. They shared stories like puzzle pieces, each memory snapping into place to form something fuller. One evening, after a storm rolled through, they sat watching the rain drip from the eaves of her porch. He was wrapped in a throw blanket, she in her robe, both cradling mugs of tea. You ever think about how strange this is? She asked softly. What do you mean? You and me. If I hadn't called about that stupid light, we might have never met. Jamal nodded. Or maybe we would have. Eventually. You believe that? He looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, some things feel like they were gonna happen, no matter what. She smiled, eyes glistening just slightly. You always talk like a poet. Guilty, he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her in close. Neither of them said another word for a long time. Still, not everything was easy. One Sunday, while they were at a local farmer's market, an older couple nearby gave them a double take. Olivia noticed, stiffening slightly as she reached for a bunch of basil. Jamal noticed too, but he kept his face neutral, his hand lightly brushing hers as if to say, don't let it in. Later, over brunch, she asked, does it bother you? What people think? He set down his fork, thoughtful. It used to. But I learned a while ago, they're gonna think what they want either way. I'd rather live free than try to fit someone else's mold. She nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. My father, she said after a moment, he wouldn't understand. You talked to him much. Not since the divorce. And even before then, we weren't close. You want him to know about me. She hesitated. I want that. Jamal didn't flinch. It's okay. We're figuring it out. No pressure. She reached across the table, fingers curling over his. Thank you for being patient with me. I'm not in a rush, he said. As long as we're walking forward, I'm good. And they did walk forward, slowly, carefully, but together. They didn't label it too soon. Didn't make grand declarations. But they were building something real, one conversation, one shared meal, one laugh at a time. He met her dog, a grumpy old bulldog named Rufus who barked at his boots but eventually sat on his feet like they belonged there. She met his nephew Isaiah, a quiet 10-year-old who drew superhero comics and asked Olivia if she liked Batman or Black Panther better. When she said, Black Panther, he nodded solemnly and whispered, good choice. On one warm Saturday, they went kayaking at the lake, gliding over glassy water, surrounded by cypress trees. Jamal told her how his mother used to bring them here with peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in foil. Olivia listened, fascinated, as if each word he said was a thread she could follow deeper into his story. Later, as they pulled the kayaks onto shore, she looked at him with an expression she hadn't shown before. Not just affection, but admiration. You're good for me, she said quietly. I hope so, he replied. You're good for me, too. That night, for the first time, he stayed over. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the world beyond her windows quiet, as if giving them permission to just be. But not everything beautiful stays simple forever. The following week, Olivia's father came into town. She hadn't told him about Jamal. Not yet. Part of her was afraid. Part of her was ashamed that she still feared the disapproval of a man who had made her feel small most of her life. But she couldn't keep pretending. She didn't want to live like that anymore. So she told him. Told him she was seeing someone. Told him his name. There was silence on the line. Then a pause. Then a sigh. Olivia, you really think this is wise? He said. I think it's right. Well, it's your life. But don't expect me to understand. She ended the call with shaking hands. Later, when Jamal came over, she told him everything. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't frown. When she finished, he took her hands gently. I don't need to be understood by everyone, he said. I just need to be respected by the people who matter. And I want to matter to you. She nodded, pulling him close. You do, she whispered. More than you know. They stood in her living room, the same place where he'd once tightened a screw and fixed a bulb. Now they were fixing something else, something tender, something real. And neither of them was afraid to let it shine.